Morning light slipped through a crack in the clouds, settling over the row of rusted storage doors. Megan Torres stood in front of one, her breath forming soft clouds in the cold air. Her denim jacket hung loose, sleeves frayed from years of wear. In her shaking hand, a wrinkled $50 bill, the last thing between her and an empty fridge. The auctioneer's voice echoed down the lot, numbers bouncing off steel. 50, she called out, surprising even herself. A beat of silence. Then the hammer dropped. The door rattled open, releasing a puff of dust that caught the weak sunlight. Inside were stacks of forgotten boxes, torn furniture, and one locked silver briefcase, gleaming faintly beneath the grime. Megan hesitated, a chill running through her chest. Why did something about that briefcase feel like it was waiting for her? The hum of Megan's old car was the only sound as she drove home from the storage lot. The steering wheel trembled slightly under her hands, the fabric of her faded jacket brushing against the seat where the threads were splitting. A thin paper receipt lay on the passenger seat, proof of her $50 gamble. She glanced at it again and let out a small, tired laugh. "You've really done it now," she muttered under her breath. When she pulled into the narrow parking space outside her apartment building, the evening sky hung low and gray, pressing down like a heavy thought. The walls of the complex were streaked with water stains, and a broken porch light flickered as she climbed the stairs. Inside, the apartment was cramped but clean. Dishes were stacked neatly to dry beside the sink. 2 backpacks rested by the door, their straps frayed and schoolbooks poking out. The soft sound of a cartoon played from the living room. "Mama!" Chloe ran to her, arms outstretched. The 5-year-old's curls bounced as she threw herself around her mother's waist. "Did you win?" Megan smiled, though her eyes looked tired. "Yeah, baby. I won." 8-year-old Liam looked up from the couch, his homework spread across the coffee table. "How much did you spend?" 50, Megan said, hanging her keys on the wall hook. "That was all we had left." Liam frowned. "What if it's junk?" She paused. "Then we'll find a way to make it not junk." It wasn't bravado, it was survival. That quiet determination she'd worn like armor since the night her husband died 3 years ago. The drunk driver's headlights, the hospital bills, the endless apologies from insurance agents that didn't mean a thing. Everything after that had been a blur of late fees, shut-off notices, and quiet tears after the kids fell asleep. Now, the stack of bills on the kitchen counter was thicker than ever. The rent was 2 weeks late. Her last paycheck from the diner barely covered food. $50 had been her last coin toss, a desperate bet that somewhere inside that rusty storage unit might be something she could sell. After dinner, noodles and canned sauce, she tucked the children into bed. Chloe clutched her armless doll. Liam mumbled something about wanting a new backpack before drifting off. Megan lingered at their doorway, watching their small bodies breathe in unison. They deserved so much more than this. The next morning, she woke before dawn. The air was cold, the apartment dim except for the thin light leaking through the blinds. She made instant coffee, grabbed a notebook, and scribbled a list. Cleaning rags, gloves, flashlight, water, snacks. She hesitated before writing one more thing. Hope. Then she crossed it out. 2 hours later, she and the kids were back at the storage facility. The same man from the auction, wearing a faded baseball cap, waved her toward the unit. "Number 32, he said. "You got the key, right?" "Right here," she replied, forcing a smile. Liam held her hand, his other gripping a half-eaten granola bar. "Can I open it?" "Let's do it together." The metal door rattled and rolled upward, groaning as it rose. A cloud of dust drifted out, the smell of old cardboard and forgotten time filling the air. Inside, the dim light revealed piles of boxes, a few broken chairs, and a stack of vinyl records in cracked plastic sleeves. Chloe wrinkled her nose. "It stinks." "Yeah," Megan said softly. "But sometimes the things that look bad on the outside have surprises inside." They stepped in carefully, the concrete cold beneath their shoes. Megan brushed her hand over a nearby box. It was labeled Cross Family in faded marker. She sliced it open with her box cutter. Inside were neatly folded clothes, suits, sequin dresses, and a few pairs of worn men's shoes. Liam held up a record sleeve. "Who's this guy?" Megan took it from him. A black and white photo of a man holding a saxophone stared back. Confident smile, crisp suit, stage lights catching the edge of the instrument. The name Vincent Cross was printed across the bottom. "I think he was a musician," she said, flipping it over. "Maybe these are worth something." There were more records, all from the same artist. Some were autographed, some still sealed. Underneath them, she found framed posters, ticket stubs, even an old concert program. The signature appeared again and again. Vincent Cross and the Silver Keys. "Mom, this one says 1987, Liam said, reading the back of a program. "That's old." Megan smiled faintly. "Older than me." She packed the items carefully into a separate box. She didn't know much about records, but she knew collectors paid well for nostalgia. Maybe this was it, her chance to finally catch a break. By noon, the kids were getting restless. Chloe sat on a box, swinging her legs. "Can we go home now?" "In a bit," Megan said, wiping her forehead. Sweat and dust clung to her hairline. She reached for another crate tucked near the back wall, heavier than the rest. It creaked as she pulled it forward. Inside were yellowed newspapers, a typewriter, and an old lamp with a cracked shade. Beneath the lamp, something metallic caught her eye, the corner of a dented metal case. She tugged it free. It was a heavy silver briefcase, dull with age but solid. The lock was secured with a rusty combination dial. Her pulse quickened. "What's that?" Liam asked. "I don't know," Megan said, turning it over in her hands. There was no name tag, no label, just faint scratches on the surface. "Can we open it?" Chloe whispered. "Not yet," Megan said. "Let's take it home first." They loaded the car with as much as they could carry. The trunk was nearly full, boxes stacked to the roof. As she closed the door, Megan glanced back at the storage unit one last time. The light had changed, shadows stretching across the floor, catching the edges of the empty space. Something about that place felt heavy, like it wasn't quite done with her. The drive home was quiet. The kids hummed along to a song on the radio while Megan's mind churned. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, landing on the briefcase sitting upright beside the jazz poster. It almost seemed to gleam, even in the fading light. When they got home, she left it near the door. The kids went straight to bed after dinner, too tired to protest. Megan lingered in the kitchen, her hands still dusty. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. She stared at the briefcase for a long time, her heart thudding. It was probably empty. Or maybe it held something worthless. But what if it didn't? What if this one gamble, was the turning point she'd been waiting for? Megan knelt down, brushing her fingers across the cold metal surface. The lock was stiff but intact. She traced the engraved letters near the handle. Model 1986, steel guard. "Whatever's in you," she whispered. Please be worth it. She placed it beside her bed that night, unable to shake the feeling that tomorrow everything might change. The briefcase sat on the kitchen table under the weak glow of the ceiling light. It looked harmless, just metal and dust, but it had a weight that filled the room. Megan stared at it as if it might breathe. The kids were asleep in their shared room, soft snores drifting down the hallway. It was the first quiet moment she'd had all day, yet her heart wouldn't settle. She wiped her hands on her jeans, grabbed a flathead screwdriver, and took a slow breath. The lock's numbers were rusted over, unreadable. She slid the tip of the screwdriver under the latch and pressed. Nothing. The metal resisted, stiff and stubborn. "Come on," she muttered. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Another push, harder this time. The screwdriver slipped, scraping her palm. She hissed in pain, flexing her fingers before trying again. Sweat gathered at her hairline. On the fourth try, she heard a faint snap. The latch gave way, and the lock broke loose, falling onto the table with a dull clink. For a moment, she didn't move, just stared. It had taken only seconds, but it felt like hours. Megan lifted the lid slowly. The hinges squeaked, reluctant to reveal what had been sealed away for nearly 4 decades. Inside, everything was neatly arranged. 2 large bundles wrapped in faded cloth. A small black notebook bound in leather. And beneath that, stacks of cash. Her breath caught. Old bills, mostly 20s and 50s, stacked in rubber-banded rolls, yellowed at the edges but still crisp in the middle. She touched one, half expecting it to crumble. It didn't. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. She glanced toward the hallway, almost expecting the kids to come running in, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. "This can't be real," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped one of the bundles. More cash. Layer after layer. She lost count after the 5th stack. Her pulse quickened, a strange mix of fear and hope rising all at once. She forced herself to stop touching the money. She needed to think. How much could this even be? Her eyes darted to the small leather notebook. It was worn smooth from handling. The name V. Cross, 1987, pressed faintly into the cover. She ran her thumb over the letters. Something about it pulled at her, a tug she couldn't explain. She flipped it open. The first page was filled with tight, slanted handwriting. June 4th, 1987. Last show tonight. The tour's been long, and I'm tired. The band's ready to move on, but I'm not ready to stop chasing the ghosts I left behind. Megan frowned, turning the page. There's money from the shows. More than I know what to do with. I can't trust anyone to keep it safe. Not after the arguments. Not after the nights that went wrong. I'll leave it here until I can come back. Her eyes widened. The words were old, but they hit with the weight of something alive. This wasn't random cash. It had a story, a heartbeat. She kept reading, her thumb smudging the ink on the next line. If I don't make it back, maybe someone will find this and do something good with it. Maybe they'll remember me for more than the mistakes. The page ended there. Megan sat back, breath shaky. She looked again at the money, neatly arranged, untouched since the day he'd written those words. Whoever V. Cross was, he hadn't come back. Her mind raced. Should she report it? Call someone? But who would believe her? She didn't even have a proper lawyer. She grabbed her phone, hesitated, then set it down again. If she turned this in, it might be taken, tied up in red tape or claimed by someone who never earned it. But if she kept it quietly, it could fix everything. rent, bills, a better school for the kids, maybe even a small business. For once, she could stop surviving and start living. She stood and began pacing, rubbing her temples. "It's just cash," she told herself. "Nobody's coming for it. It's been here for almost 40 years. Still, guilt crept in like a cold draft. The thought of keeping something that wasn't hers didn't sit right, but neither did the idea of giving it away while her children slept hungry in the next room. She sat back down, opening the notebook again, hoping it would tell her what to do. July 2nd, 1987. I wrote to her again. "Anna. Maybe she'll answer this time. I can't keep pretending I don't think about her or the baby she had. Every night on stage, I see her face in the lights. I told her I'd make things right. I still mean it." The words hit her harder this time. Anna. That name. Her mother's name was Anna. She blinked, unsure if she'd read it right. She turned the page, scanning the next entry. "If I ever find her, I'll tell her everything. She deserves to know. They both do. I won't let the music take me before I make peace with the past." Her chest tightened. She looked again at the first name, tracing it with her fingertip. It couldn't be. There were thousands of people named Anna. It had to be coincidence. Still, something deep inside her stirred, a quiet recognition she couldn't ignore. She flipped to the last page. A single sentence sat at the bottom, written with uneven pressure. "For the daughter I never got to meet. I hope you find this someday." Her hand went cold. The air in the room felt heavier, pressing against her chest. The briefcase, the journal, the man named V. Cross, it all suddenly felt connected to something far closer to home than she wanted to believe. She glanced toward the hallway again, listening to her children's breathing. The sound grounded her. She reached for the notebook one more time, closing it gently. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking the minutes between fear and decision. Megan pulled the bundles of cash together, set them back in the case, and closed the lid. It clicked softly, like the sound of a door closing on one life and opening another. She slid the briefcase under her bed, out of sight but impossible to forget. That night, she barely slept. The name Anna replayed in her mind over and over. Her mother had died 5 years earlier, and with her had gone 1,000 unanswered questions about Megan's childhood, her absent father, and the small, faded photo her mother had once kept hidden in a box of records. Now, that same world of records had found its way back to her, through a dusty unit, a stranger's journal, and a briefcase full of cash. She turned toward the window, watching the first gray light of dawn creep into the room. Somewhere out there, pieces of her past had been waiting, and now they'd found her. By the time morning arrived, Megan felt like she hadn't slept at all. Her head throbbed from the constant replay of last night, the briefcase, the money, the journal, and that name written in fading ink. Anna. She sat at the kitchen table, stirring coffee she couldn't afford to waste. The sunlight leaking through the blinds painted thin lines across the floor. Her children's laughter came faintly from the living room, where cartoons flickered on the old television. For a moment, the sound calmed her, a reminder of normalcy. But nothing about today felt normal. Her eyes drifted to the hallway. The briefcase sat half hidden under her bed, heavy with both secrets and possibilities. She hadn't touched it since closing it last night, but her thoughts circled it like a magnet. After breakfast, she sent Liam and Chloe outside to play, grabbed the journal, and sat down again. The cover felt warm from the sunlight. The initials, V. Cross, were pressed into the leather like a signature frozen in time. She turned to where she'd left off. July 9th, 1987. I thought I saw her in Chicago. Same walk, same smile, but it wasn't her. The universe has a cruel way of replaying what you've lost. I wrote another letter anyway, just in case she ever reads them. Megan traced the date with her thumb. The handwriting slanted slightly, the ink darker, as if written in haste. The next page continued. Anna never forgave me for leaving. I don't blame her. I thought chasing music would make me a man worth her love. Instead, I just learned how to be lonely. If she still has the baby, I hope she tells her one thing, that her father wasn't just noise and lights, but a man who wanted to come home. Megan's throat tightened. Her eyes burned, but she kept reading. The next entry was shorter. The money's safe now. Locked away until I can start over. I'll come back for it after the final show. It's just one more night. The page ended abruptly. She turned the next few pages, all blank, except for one torn halfway through. Only one line was still visible. If you find this, know that I tried. She leaned back, staring at the words. They pulsed in her mind like a heartbeat, faint but unshakable. Vincent Cross, jazz musician, 1987. Anna, her mother, a missing father she'd never known. Could it really be connected? Megan's memories of her mother were soft, faded around the edges. Anna had been quiet, always humming when she cooked, always lingering by the window whenever old jazz records played. Megan remembered those nights clearly, her mother's hand resting on the turntable, her gaze far away, as if the music carried a ghost only she could see. Back then, Megan had thought it was just nostalgia. But now it felt like memory had been hiding something. She stood and went to the small closet in the hallway. At the top shelf sat a cardboard box labeled Mom's Things. It had moved with her through every apartment, every eviction, every start over. She brought it to the kitchen, blowing off a thin layer of dust before opening it. Inside were folded scarves, an old perfume bottle, and a stack of photographs. She lifted one. A younger version of her mother, smiling, standing outside a theater marquee that read Vincent Cross and the Silver Keys, live tonight. Anna looked radiant. Her hand rested on the shoulder of a man standing beside her, holding a saxophone. Her breath caught. The same face from the record cover. Vincent Cross. Her fingers shook as she turned the photo over. Written on the back in her mother's careful handwriting, "The night everything changed." Megan sat perfectly still. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator. A chill ran through her as realization set in. The man who vanished in 1987 wasn't just a stranger whose things she'd bought. He was her father. She pressed the photo to her chest, unable to speak. Memories began to surface in fragments. The records her mother refused to sell even when money ran out, the way she'd whisper, "He would have loved you," when Megan fell asleep. The unanswered questions, the long silences whenever Megan asked who her father was. It all made sense now. The silence wasn't forgetfulness. It was grief. Megan wiped her face, forcing herself to breathe. The photo still trembled in her hand. She reached for her phone and searched the name again. Vincent Cross Musician, 1987. More articles appeared this time. Old newspapers, scanned and archived. Jazz legend missing after car accident. Last seen leaving concert venue in Cleveland. Vehicle found off highway, driver presumed dead. Each headline chipped away at hope, replacing it with truth. He hadn't disappeared into fame. He died coming home. Her chest ached. It was like losing someone she never had a chance to meet. She scrolled further until she found a black and white photo of Vincent on stage. the same suit, the same saxophone. A man lost to time, but somehow through dust and chance, he had reached her. Megan turned back to the journal, whispering into the quiet. "You tried to find us, didn't you?" The words hung in the air. She thought about her mother, the way she'd kept those records safe all her life, even when she sold furniture, jewelry, almost everything else. It wasn't random. Her mother must have known about the storage unit. Maybe she'd written down the number somewhere, waiting for Megan to find it one day. Megan's pulse quickened as she opened her mother's old address book, still in the same box. Most pages were blank, but near the back, she spotted a faded note in blue ink. Unit number 32. Keep this safe. Her breath hitched. The same unit she had just bought. It wasn't chance. It was something her mother had wanted her to discover. One final secret left behind. Tears blurred her vision. "You knew," she whispered. "You wanted me to find him." For a long moment, she sat there, surrounded by the past, the photograph in one hand and the journal in the other. In that silence, something inside her shifted. The ache that had followed her for years, the weight of abandonment, of struggle, of not knowing, began to ease, just a little. Vincent Cross hadn't walked away from them. Life had taken him before he could come back. Megan exhaled slowly, feeling both sorrow and peace at once. The money wasn't just money now. It was a message, the promise of a man she'd never met, finally reaching her across time. Outside, the sun dipped low, flooding the kitchen with a warm orange glow. The light hit the photograph, making the saxophone shine faintly. Megan ran her thumb along the photo's edge and whispered, "I found you." But as the weight of her discovery sank in, a new question began to form. If the money and the journal were his, could she legally keep them now that she knew who he was? And if she couldn't, what would it cost to prove who she really was? The following morning, Megan woke with a determination she hadn't felt in years. The discovery had shifted something deep within her, fear mixed with purpose. For so long, she'd been fighting just to make it through each day, but now there was something else pulling her forward, answers. She packed the journal, the photograph, and her mother's address book into a canvas tote, careful not to wake the children. She left a note for Liam and Chloe on the fridge. "Back soon. Don't open the door for anyone." Then she stepped into the chilly morning air, the rising sun reflecting faintly on the metal of her car. The drive to the city library took nearly 40 minutes. The streets were quiet, lined with closed shops and early commuters. Megan parked near the entrance, gripping her tote tightly as if it held her entire past, which, in a way, it did. Inside, the library smelled faintly of paper and polish. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, landing across rows of old computers. She walked straight to the archive desk, her voice low but steady. "Hi, I'm looking for old newspaper records," she said. "Late 1980s, anything on a musician named Vincent Cross." The clerk, a kind-looking woman in her 60s, adjusted her glasses. "We have microfilm archives and digital copies for that period. You'll want the local history room." Megan thanked her and followed the directions to the back corner, where rows of monitors glowed softly in the dim light. She typed Vincent Cross 1987 musician into the database search bar and waited. Dozens of results appeared. She clicked through one after another. Concert reviews, interviews, photos of Vincent with his band. He was everywhere. A man adored by audiences, always smiling, always mid-performance. Then came the articles she had seen on her phone. Only now she could read them in full. Tragedy strikes jazz scene. Vincent Cross missing after late-night crash. The article described how his car was found off a rural highway outside Cleveland. No passengers, no body recovered. Only the wreckage and his saxophone case lying nearby. Police had assumed he died instantly. The band held a memorial weeks later. His belongings, it said, were never claimed. Megan leaned back in her chair, the words blurring for a moment. So it was true, he never made it home. She wiped her eyes and continued searching, desperate for any mention of her mother's name. Anna Torres, Anna Cross, even Anna, Chicago. Nothing. The silence felt sharp. Still, she wasn't ready to stop. She took out the journal again, flipping to the entry where Vincent had written about sending letters. Maybe there were records of them, somewhere. Her stomach tightened. Letters, journals, lost items. They could all trace back to one place. The storage unit. Maybe there was more hidden inside. Something she hadn't seen yet. By noon, she was back at the storage facility. The same manager from before looked up from behind the counter. "Back again, huh?" he said, smirking. "Yeah," Megan replied, forcing a polite smile. "I think I missed a few boxes." He nodded. "Take your time. You've got the whole month." The unit looked different now that she knew what it held. The dust, the silence, it all seemed alive with memory. She crouched beside the crates she hadn't finished sorting and began opening them one by one. Old sheet music, tour schedules, dozens of letters, all unsent, folded neatly in envelopes that had yellowed with age. She opened one carefully. "Anna, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to say what I should have said years ago. I never stopped thinking about you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to meet her, our daughter. Please don't shut me out again. Vincent." Megan's vision blurred. Her hands shook as she opened another, then another, each one more heartfelt than the last. He had written dozens of letters, all sealed, none mailed. Every word a confession, a plea, a promise he never got to deliver. Her mother must have never received them. Or maybe she had, but never said a word. Megan pressed her hand over her heart, whispering, "You tried." Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her back to the present. It was a text from the daycare, a reminder that payment was overdue. Reality snapped into focus. The money from the briefcase flashed in her mind again. Rent, bills, food. It could solve everything. But now that she knew who it belonged to, could she really keep it? The law didn't care about emotion. Cared about proof. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, Megan sat at her laptop and searched what happens if you find money in a storage unit. Hundreds of results. Most said the same thing. The contents legally belong to the winning bidder once the auction is final. So legally, the money was hers. But morally, that was another story. The more she thought about it, the more it didn't feel like a simple find. It felt like inheritance. A connection that had crossed decades to reach her. She stared at the photograph of her mother and Vincent again, their smiles frozen in a moment that no longer existed. What would they want her to do? She turned the question over in her mind for hours until finally, she opened her email and started typing. To Miller and Jameson Legal Services. Subject: Inquiry. Abandoned storage unit and found property. She explained the situation in brief, avoiding details about the journal or photograph. She only mentioned the money, asking if there was a process to claim ownership or report it safely. She hesitated before hitting send, then pressed the button. The next day, she got a call. "Ms. Torres," a calm voice said. "This is Daniel Miller from Miller and Jameson. I got your email. Could you come in tomorrow morning? There are some things we should discuss in person. Megan's stomach fluttered. She agreed, then hung up, staring at her reflection in the window. Tomorrow, she would walk into that office with a story no one would believe. A story about a lost father, a hidden fortune, and a daughter who had stumbled upon both by accident. But deep down, she knew it wasn't really an accident. It was something her mother had left for her to find, a final thread connecting the past to the present. As night settled in, Megan sat on the edge of her bed, holding the photograph again. Vincent's smile looked softer now, less like a stranger and more like a whisper from the blood that ran through her veins. The money could change her life. The truth could change who she was. She wasn't sure which one scared her more. The law office smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. Megan sat across from Daniel Miller, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her tote bag rested at her feet, the journal and photograph safely tucked inside. Daniel leaned forward, studying the document she had brought, the auction receipt, photos of the storage unit, and the few scanned pages from Vincent's journal. His voice was calm, deliberate. So, the unit was legally purchased at a public auction? Yes, Megan replied. I paid $50. The money and everything inside were part of it. He nodded. In most cases, the buyer owns the contents outright. But you mentioned a journal that connects the items to a specific person, Vincent Cross. Megan hesitated. Yes, I think he was my father. The words hung in the air. Saying them aloud made them feel real for the first time. Daniel's brows lifted slightly, but he didn't interrupt. You said your mother's name was Anna Torres? She knew him. There are letters he wrote to her, all from 1987. I found them in the unit. I even found a photo of them together. He leaned back, thoughtful. That could be significant. Vincent Cross's estate was never officially settled. He was declared deceased in absentia, which means, legally, his assets might still exist somewhere under probate. If your claim as a biological child can be proven, that changes things. Megan felt her heart race. Proven? You mean a DNA test? Yes, Daniel said. It would be the simplest way. We'd need to confirm your relation, but since Vincent's remains were never recovered, we'll have to use other methods. Personal effects, biological traces if available, or DNA from known relatives, if any are alive. Relatives, she echoed. He nodded. Vincent had a younger brother who died years ago, but I believe there's a distant cousin still living in Ohio. If we reach out, they may cooperate, or they may contest the claim. Megan's stomach tightened. Contest? Why? Daniel sighed. Because if your claim is valid, it makes you the sole heir to his estate, everything that's still legally connected to his name, including royalties and any assets that weren't declared dormant. She didn't respond. The word heir felt foreign, almost absurd. She was used to overdue notices, not inheritances. Within a week, Daniel filed the paperwork to open an inquiry into the Vincent Cross estate. The process moved quickly. Too quickly. Within days, Megan received a letter from an attorney representing Henry Cross, the cousin Daniel had mentioned. It was brief and cold. Our client disputes any familial connection claimed by Megan Torres and demands an immediate halt to the estate proceedings until proof of biological relation can be provided. Megan's chest sank. She showed the letter to Daniel during their next meeting. He scanned it, shaking his head. We expected this. Don't worry. It's posturing. They're after control of the estate, but we'll let evidence speak louder than arguments. Soon after, Megan was asked to provide a DNA sample, a simple swab taken in Daniel's office. Henry Cross was ordered to do the same. While they waited for results, Megan's days felt endless. Every ring of the phone made her heart jump. Every letter in the mailbox felt like judgment. She tried to keep life normal for the kids. School drop-offs, simple dinners, bedtime stories. But even while reading to Chloe, her mind drifted back to the courtroom she knew was coming, a room full of strangers deciding if she was telling the truth about her own blood. 3 weeks later, she sat on a wooden bench outside the county courthouse. The hall smelled faintly of polish and nerves. Daniel stood beside her, flipping through a folder. "You ready?" he asked. Megan nodded, though she wasn't sure she was. Inside the courtroom, the air felt heavy. At the opposite table sat Henry Cross, a tall man with sharp features and a suit that fit too perfectly. His lawyer spoke first, his tone smooth but dismissive. "There's no concrete proof that Ms. Torres has any legitimate claim. She admits she found this supposed evidence in a storage unit, not through family contact or records." Daniel rose calmly. "Your Honor, while the discovery was unconventional, the evidence is compelling. We have photographs, signed letters, and, as of this morning, DNA results verifying a direct paternal match between Ms. Torres and the late Vincent Cross." The room went still. Even Henry turned, his expression faltering. Megan felt her throat tighten as Daniel handed the sealed document to the judge. The sound of the paper sliding across the wooden desk felt deafening. The judge opened it, scanned the page, and looked up. The results show a 99.9% probability of relation. Ms. Torres is indeed the biological daughter of Vincent Cross. A wave of relief washed over her so suddenly she almost couldn't breathe. The noise of the courtroom blurred. She barely heard the rest, something about validation of claim, estate transfer pending, and closing remarks. All she could think was, "He's really my father." Henry didn't stay to hear the ruling. He gathered his papers and left, jaw tight, footsteps echoing down the marble hall. When the session ended, Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. "You're officially recognized as his heir." Megan nodded, still dazed. Her eyes burned, but this time from relief. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled. "Don't thank me. This was your truth. All I did was help it find its voice." Outside, the sky had cleared. The air felt lighter, almost new. Megan walked down the courthouse steps, clutching the certified document in her hand. The wind caught her hair, and for the first time in years, she smiled without forcing it. The briefcase, the journal, the photograph, all of it had led her here. Somewhere, she felt her mother's presence, steady and proud. And somewhere further beyond, she imagined a man holding a saxophone under stage lights, smiling as if he finally got to see his daughter win. That night, the apartment was quiet. The children were asleep, their laughter replaced by the soft rhythm of breathing through half-closed doors. The court papers sat on the kitchen table, still crisp, still strange, proof that everything she believed about her life had changed. Megan sat in the silence, staring at the briefcase resting beside her chair. It had carried money, truth, and grief in equal measure. Now that the legal fight was over, she no longer saw it as a prize. It was a message. She unlatched the case gently, her fingers moving slower than before. The smell of old leather and paper filled the room. Beneath the wrapped bundles of cash lay an envelope she hadn't noticed earlier, sealed and slightly yellowed. On the front, in careful cursive, were 6 words. "To my daughter, if she ever finds this. Her breath caught. She hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. Then she slid a finger under the seal and opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, written in the same slanted handwriting as the journal. She began to read. "My little girl, if these words ever reach you, it means time ran out before I could. I wanted to see you. I wanted to tell you that none of the mistakes I made ever meant I didn't love you. I left chasing music and came back chasing forgiveness. I just didn't make it in time." Megan's hand trembled. She pressed her palm over her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I kept this money not for me, but for you. I thought I'd hand it to you one day, tell you to use it to start something of your own. If your mother never told you about me, I understand. She deserved peace more than I deserved a second chance." The words blurred as her tears fell. She paused, wiping them quickly before continuing. "Don't let the world make you small. Don't let loss turn you bitter. If you find this, let it mean that I kept my promise in some way, that I still gave you the life I couldn't. There's more to you than struggle. You come from music, fire, and love. Don't forget that." At the bottom of the letter, the ink had smudged slightly, but she could still read the closing line. "Love always. Dad, Vincent Cross." Megan lowered the paper and let out a soft sob she'd been holding back for years. Every unanswered question, every time she'd wondered why her father never came for her, all of it found a quiet, aching answer in those few lines. He hadn't abandoned them. He had been trying to come home. She sat there for a long time, reading the letter over and over, her tears falling freely now. The walls of the apartment seemed to fade around her, replaced by memories that weren't quite her own. Smoky clubs, the sound of saxophones, her mother's laughter. It was as if, across the distance of decades, her parents were finally speaking to her together. After a while, she stood and walked to the window. The city below was still awake, lights glowing in quiet apartments, the hum of cars in the distance. She folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest. Her reflection in the glass looked different, not just tired, but alive again. Megan whispered into the night, "I found you, Dad." The words trembled in the air, fragile but full of peace. The next morning, she woke with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. She brewed coffee, made pancakes for the kids, and watched as Liam and Chloe giggled at the table. For the first time, their laughter didn't echo against the weight of debt and uncertainty. It sounded like the start of something new. She reached into her tote bag and unfolded the letter once more, reading the final line silently. "Don't let the world make you small." That sentence echoed through her mind all day. It felt like instruction, almost a blessing. Later that week, she met with Daniel again to finalize the paperwork. He noticed the letter folded neatly in her hand and gave her a quiet smile. "That from him?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes. I finally know what he wanted me to do." "And what's that?" "To live," she said simply. "Not just survive, actually live." Daniel smiled, the kind that needed no words. "Then I'd say he succeeded." Megan left the office and walked down the street, her steps lighter than they'd been in years. She passed a small shop for rent, its windows dusty and the sign half tilted. A for lease notice hung in the corner. She stopped, staring through the glass. Inside, the space was empty, but she could almost see shelves, records, and warm lights. She could hear music drifting softly in her mind. Jazz, of course. A thought began to take shape. She reached into her bag and touched the envelope again, whispering quietly, "Maybe this is what you meant." For the first time since that day at the auction, She felt completely sure of what she wanted to do next. Her father had left her more than money. He'd left her a direction, a way to turn pain into something that could live and breathe again. Megan smiled softly as she stepped away from the glass, the morning light catching her reflection. Behind her, the city moved on. Ahead of her, something new was waiting. 3 months later, the small shop on Maple Avenue had changed completely. Where dust once settled on empty shelves, sunlight now spilled through clean windows, glinting off rows of vintage vinyl and neatly folded clothes. The smell of polished wood and coffee drifted through the air as soft jazz played from a turntable behind the counter. Above the entrance, a new sign gleamed proudly. Vincent's Vintage, where every story finds its song. Megan stood behind the counter, adjusting the placement of a framed photo, the one of her parents outside that old theater. In it, her mother's eyes sparkled, and Vincent's hand rested gently on her shoulder. It was more than decoration. It was the soul of the place. She stepped back, hands on her hips, and smiled. "Looks good, huh?" Liam, now 9, was stacking records nearby, his energy filling the space. "It looks awesome, Mom. Like a real store." Chloe twirled in the middle of the room, humming along with the music. "Can we play Grandpa's song again?" Megan chuckled softly. "Sure, sweetheart. Let's make it the soundtrack for today." She dropped the needle on a record, one of Vincent's originals, and the sound of a saxophone filled the air, smooth and full of warmth. For a moment, she stood still, listening. It wasn't just music anymore. It was a connection, a bridge between what was lost and what had been found. The journey to this moment had not been easy. The inheritance had given her a foundation, but rebuilding a life required more than money. It took courage, long nights, and faith that she could turn something broken into something whole. She'd paid off every debt, cleared the rent that had once haunted her mailbox, and opened savings accounts for both children. Then she'd found this small corner building for sale, worn out but full of potential, much like herself. She'd spent weeks cleaning, painting, and restoring every inch. The name had come naturally. Vincent's Vintage. It was more than a store. It was a thank you. Local customers began stopping by, some drawn by curiosity, others by the music that played out onto the street. Word spread that the shop wasn't just about selling things. It was about stories. Every record came with history. Every vintage jacket had a tale stitched into its seams. People brought in donations and left with something more valuable than what they'd purchased, a sense of connection. One afternoon, a young mother entered the store with 2 small children in tow. She looked tired, her eyes holding the same kind of quiet worry Megan had once worn. "These prices are fair," the woman murmured, scanning the racks. "I've never seen a shop like this before." Megan smiled. "It's meant for people like us," she said softly. "Everything here deserves a second chance, just like we do." The woman nodded, smiling for the first time. As she left, she whispered, "Thank you." When the door closed, Megan stood there for a long moment, her chest full. The store had become something she hadn't expected, a refuge. Not just for her, but for others. That evening, she sat at the counter after closing time, the lights dimmed and the records still spinning slowly. The shelves around her were filled with the lives of strangers, but her father's presence lingered in every note that played. Daniel had stopped by earlier that week to deliver the final papers confirming the transfer of Vincent's royalties and estate rights. The process was done. Her father's music, his name, his memory, all of it officially belonged to her now. But more than that, it lived through her. She took a deep breath and opened the old leather journal one more time. The pages were fragile, but the words were strong. She flipped to the back, where she had added her own note in neat handwriting. Dad, you gave me more than you knew. I'll keep your story alive, and make sure your music never stops. The bell above the door jingled suddenly. Megan looked up to see a familiar face, Mrs. Jacobs, her elderly neighbor, holding a small plant in her hands. I brought you something for the counter, Mrs. Jacobs said. A store this beautiful needs a bit of green. Megan smiled and took the plant. Thank you. It's perfect. As Mrs. Jacobs glanced around, her gaze landed on the framed photo. That's him, isn't it? The musician you told me about. Yes, Megan said, her voice soft. My father. He'd be proud, Mrs. Jacobs said. You can feel it when you walk in. This place has heart. When the woman left, Megan placed the plant beside the photo. For a long moment, she just stood there, listening to the faint crackle of the vinyl, the sound of her father's saxophone rising and falling. It was no longer a ghost of her past. It was the rhythm of her present. Later, she looked up, holding Chloe's small hand as Liam skipped ahead. The streetlights flickered to life, their glow reflecting off the sign above the door. Megan paused, looking up at the words Vincent's Vintage. A warmth spread through her chest, not pride, but peace. Ready to go home? Liam called out. She nodded, smiling. Yeah, let's go. As they walked down the quiet street, the tune from the record still echoed faintly in her ears. It was the same song Vincent had written the year she was born, a melody about starting over. For the first time in her life, Megan understood what that truly meant. They reached the car, laughter trailing behind them. Chloe hummed the song softly, her small voice carrying into the cool evening air. Megan joined in, tears catching in her eyes, not of sadness, but gratitude. The life she'd been fighting so hard to survive had finally become one worth living. And in every note of that song, she could feel him, her father, her mother, their love, woven quietly into the rhythm of her new beginning. The morning sky was clear, the kind of soft blue that carried both peace and memory. Megan parked the car beside the quiet hillside cemetery, the same place she had come to a month after the store opened. The children sat in the back seat, their eyes wide with curiosity, their hands clutching the small bouquet of lilies and a vinyl record wrapped carefully in paper. Are we visiting Grandpa again? Chloe asked, her voice gentle. Megan nodded, smiling faintly. Yes, sweetheart. We're going to let him know how we're doing. They stepped out together, the sound of gravel crunching beneath their shoes. The wind moved through the trees, rustling the leaves as sunlight filtered through the branches. The headstone stood a few rows ahead, simple, elegant, engraved with his name. Vincent Cross, 1952 to 1987. His song lives on. Someone from the city's music association had arranged for the stone when her parentage became public. The moment Megan first saw it, she'd cried, not just for the years she never had with him, but for the years she'd finally found him. Now, she knelt beside the grave, her children standing quietly beside her. She placed the flowers at the base, then unwrapped the vinyl record, one of his originals, the one that had played the first day Vincent's Vintage opened. This was his favorite, she said softly. The one he wrote when he met Grandma Anna. Liam tilted his head. Can he hear it? Megan smiled, touching the record's edge. I think he can. She set the record gently beside the flowers, then pulled from her bag a folded piece of paper, the letter Vincent had written to her, now slightly worn from being read so many times. She unfolded it slowly, her eyes scanning the familiar lines. For a moment, her voice caught, but then she began to read aloud, not just to herself, but for her children, for the man resting beneath the stone, for the music that still echoed in her life. "My little girl, if these words ever reach you." Her voice trembled but didn't break. As she read, the wind seemed to move in time with her words. Liam listened intently, his eyes fixed on the ground. Chloe leaned against her, quiet and still. When she reached the end, "You come from music, fire, and love. Don't forget that." She folded the letter carefully, placing it beside the record. Megan wiped her eyes and smiled. "I didn't forget," she whispered. "We didn't forget." The children stepped closer. Liam knelt and traced his grandfather's name with his small fingers. "Mom, can we come back next week?" Megan nodded. "As often as you like." They stayed there for a while, not talking, just listening to the wind, the birds, the faint hum of the city below. It felt like the world had paused to let the moment breathe. When it was time to leave, Megan stood, brushing her hands against her jeans. She took one last look at the headstone before turning toward the car. As they walked back, Chloe looked up at her. "Mom." "Yes, baby." "Do you think Grandpa knows about the store?" Megan smiled softly. "I think he does. I think he's proud of us." Back in town, Vincent's Vintage glowed against the afternoon sun. The sign above the door gleamed brighter than usual, the reflection dancing across the windows. Inside, soft jazz drifted through the air, a live recording of Vincent's last concert, recently restored and released by a local label. Customers browsed the aisles, laughter filling the small space. Megan stood behind the counter, greeting each face with warmth. The air smelled faintly of coffee and old vinyl. On the far wall hung a framed display, the letter, the photograph, and a copy of Vincent's record together. Every person who walked in noticed it. Some asked about it. Some simply stood and read in silence. It wasn't just decoration. It was a story told in stillness. Liam sat on the floor near the counter, doing homework. Chloe was arranging vintage pins on a display board, humming one of her grandfather's songs under her breath. Megan watched them, her heart full. The fear that had once ruled her life had given way to something steady. Peace, purpose, belonging. She poured herself a small cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching the afternoon light spill through the front windows. The sound of the saxophone filled the store, each note rising and fading like a heartbeat. For the first time, she didn't feel like a woman trying to survive. She felt like someone who had arrived, right where she was meant to be. A new customer walked in, a teenage boy with headphones around his neck. He glanced at the framed display, paused, then smiled. "You related to him?" he asked. Megan nodded. "He was my father." The boy looked around the shop, impressed. "He'd like this place," he said. "Feels alive." Megan smiled. "That's the idea." When he left, she glanced toward the window again. Outside, the street was quiet, golden light reflecting off passing cars. The sign above the door shimmered softly, "Vincent's Vintage, where every story finds its song." Megan looked up at it, her eyes glistening. "We found ours," she whispered. As the final track on the record ended, a brief silence filled the store. Then, faintly, the sound of applause from the old live audience played, cheering for a man who had poured his soul into every note. Megan closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. It didn't feel like the end of a story. It felt like a continuation. The melody carried forward through her children, through every person who walked through that door. Outside, the evening lights flickered on, painting the street in soft amber. The camera of imagination would pull back slowly, the shop glowing warmly against the fading day, the music spilling faintly into the street. Her father's legacy lived on, not in fame, but in love, in second chances, in music rediscovered, in a woman who turned loss into hope. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more life-changing stories like this one. Your support helps us share real stories of hope, redemption, and second chances. And tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss.